The year 1518. Forget plague and famine, forget the usual specters of death that stalked medieval Europe. In the city of Strasbourg, a dark new horror emerged, one that defied all reason and medical understanding. An irresistible, manic compulsion to dance until the heart gave out. It was a mass suicide by choreography. A nightmare danced into existence on the sun-baked cobblestones of a prosperous German city. This is the true story of the most bizarre and tragic epidemic in history, a terrifying testament to the breaking point of the human psyche. The summer of 1518 lay over Strasbourg like a suffocating shroud. The city, a bustling, prosperous jewel in the crown of the Holy Roman Empire, a place of commerce, canals, and soaring Gothic spires, was already frayed at the edges. A brutal famine had recently clawed its way through the populace, leaving behind a residue of physical weakness and deep spiritual anxiety. The common folk, weary from incessant floods and failed harvests, saw their world through a lens of apocalyptic dread, ripe for the strange and the terrifying. On a blisteringly hot Tuesday in July, the historical records are clear on the 14th day, a solitary figure stepped out of a modest half-timbered house near the Choreomania district. Her name, etched forever in the city's ledger, was Frau Troffea. She was middle-aged, unremarkable, and known to her neighbors as quiet, perhaps a little morose. Yet what she did next was so utterly bizarre, so divorced from rational behavior, that it stopped the street in its tracks. She began to dance. It was not a joyous dance. There was no music, no rhythm save the frantic, jarring beat of her own exhaustion. Her eyes were glazed, fixed on some unseen point above the rooftops. Her arms flailed, her legs kicked and shuffled with agonizing intensity. She did not skip, she stomped. She did not twirl, she jerked. It was a violent, involuntary spectacle, like a puppet whose strings had been seized by a malicious hand. Neighbors, initially amused, quickly grew concerned. They called out to her, offering water, demanding she stop. She offered no answer. She could not. For 6 solid days, Frau Troffea danced. She stumbled only to catch herself and resume the punishing, endless movement. Her feet bled, her clothes shredded, and sweat poured from her body, soaking the sun-baked cobblestones. By the end of the week, she collapsed, only to rise again after a brief, restless pause, driven by an invisible tormentor. The curiosity of the crowd quickly curdled into fear, and then something far more sinister happened. By the end of the first week, 3 other men had joined her macabre ballet. By the second week, the dancers numbered nearly 30 dozen. The spectacle had ceased to be an oddity. It was now an epidemic. The mania spread through the crowded, narrow streets like wildfire, not through touch or breath, but through sheer, terrifying observation. People watched, horrified, and then, inexorably, they found themselves unable to stop the twitching in their own limbs, the compelling urge to join the grotesque choreography. The authorities were baffled. Strasbourg was governed by a tight-knit council, men of law and faith, accustomed to dealing with thieves, plagues, and civil disputes. This was beyond their purview. The city's physicians, highly educated men of the time, were summoned. They dismissed any demonic or supernatural cause and concluded, based on the established Galenic medical theory, that the affliction was a hot blood disease. The heat of the body, they theorized, had risen to the brain, causing a feverish delirium that could only be cured by further movement. In a historical blunder of astonishing magnitude, the city council, advised by their physicians, issued a fatal edict. Instead of isolating the dancers, they decided to encourage the dancing to sweat the hot blood out of their systems. They declared, the sickness can only be expelled if the afflicted are allowed to dance day and night. They cleared public squares, built temporary wooden stages, and most damningly, hired professional musicians, pipers, drummers, and fiddlers to play loud, relentless music. Their logic was morbidly simple. Keep the afflicted moving until the fever broke. The intended cure became a horrifying accelerant. They danced for their lives, quite literally, with no rest, their faces contorted in expressions of terror and pain, the music only serving to whip their torment into a frenzy.
The number of dancers swelled, reaching an estimated 400 people by the height of the crisis in August. Imagine the scene. Hundreds of citizens, men, women, and children, weaving through the streets, pounding their feet on stages, driven by an invisible force. The professional musicians, initially amused by the bizarre gig, became pale and exhausted, their music a soundtrack to an unfolding tragedy. The symptoms were not playful, they were catastrophic. The continuous high-intensity movement, often lasting days without sleep or rest, led to severe dehydration. Many suffered broken bones, torn muscles, and debilitating sores on their feet. The ultimate inescapable result of this non-stop physical torment was organ failure. The deaths began. The first victims were the frailest, the elderly, and those weakened by the prior famine. They would simply collapse in mid-jerk, their hearts finally giving out from the ceaseless strain. Historical accounts recorded by contemporary chroniclers claim that at the peak of the mania, people were dying at a rate of up to 15 per day. Strasbourg, a city of life, became a city of death, fueled by the sheer, brutal exertion of its own citizens. The smell of sweat, blood, and fear mingled in the oppressive summer air. The council's secular medical solution had failed disastrously. As the death toll mounted, panic gripped the populace. People stopped looking to their doctors and turned to their priests. The secular diagnosis of hot blood was abandoned, replaced by the terrifying specter of divine punishment or demonic possession. The focus shifted to the church, and specifically to the shrine of Saint Vitus, the patron saint believed to have the power to protect people from dancing sicknesses. The authorities issued a second, radically different edict. The stages were torn down, the music was silenced, and a ban was placed on public dancing, music, and even gambling. The remaining afflicted were loaded onto wagons and carted out of the city, not to a hospital, but to the remote, isolated sanctuary of Saint Vitus in Saverne. The priests performed rituals, laying hands upon the victims and placing their worn leather shoes, now full of holes and blood, on a separate altar dedicated to the saint. They were given red crosses, which they were instructed to wear as a sign of penance and protection. Whether it was the quiet isolation, the change in environment, or the potent psychological effect of the sacred rituals, the mania finally began to recede. The compulsion to dance gradually lessened, the exhaustion finally overcoming the irresistible urge. By early September, the terrifying 3-month-long episode of the dancing plague of 1518 was over. The event was meticulously recorded, yet the question of its cause remains one of history's most compelling psychological puzzles. Historians and scientists have largely settled on the theory of mass psychogenic illness, or mass hysteria. Given the extreme famine, high anxiety, and superstitious fear gripping Strasbourg, the sight of Frau Troffea's initial dance likely acted as a trigger for a community under immense psychological strain. The physical symptoms were undeniably real, leading to real deaths, but their origin was the collective, desperate mind of the populace. The Strasbourg dancing plague of 1518 remains a profound, chilling testament to the power of the human mind under duress. It is a story of how famine and fear, when combined with an inexplicable spectacle, can literally turn the human body into a machine of self-destruction.